This is Jerome Corsi, and today it's April 11th, 2023. This is Tuesday, and we're here with you again at thetruthcentral.com. We want to report the truth and what's going on in the news. I think you're going to find this a interesting show. Some of the aspects of what's going on today are pretty remarkable. I'm going to begin with this story. The EPA came out. This was a story that the New York Times was running. They actually ran it, I believe, on Monday. But the point is that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a group of bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats in Washington, have decided that they're going to up the emission requirements so that by 2032, the majority of cars purchased will have to be electric vehicles. So what the story starts out by saying is the Biden administration is planning some of the most stringent auto pollution limits in the world, designed to ensure that all electric cars will make up 67% of new passenger vehicles sold in the country by 2032. This is going to be a quantum leap, the New York Times reported. Previously, just 5.8% of all vehicles sold last year were all electric. And the Biden administration has just determined that we are going to fight greenhouse gas emissions generated by cars. We are going to force people to buy electric cars. The emission requirements will demand that as many as 67%, which is basically approximately 2/3 of all cars in the country, are going to be electric. Now, first of all, I pointed out repeatedly that electric cars don't work very well. You have to be able to charge them. They take a long time to charge. If the batteries break, you've got another $20,000 or so bill to replace the battery. They are difficult to maintain and they're more expensive to buy and hard to find. I mean, if we have that many electric vehicles, we're going to have to really ramp up dramatically on the charging stations. They take a long time to charge. They're not an instant charge. And it's also probably going to push up the price of even regular automobiles, because suddenly if you have a regular automobile, that's going to be a premium. But again, are there going to be gas stations enough? Because with fewer gas-powered cars, there's going to be fewer service stations. Now, the book I wrote, and there it is. I mean, this is the truth about global warming and climate change. And the book is done extremely well. It's part of a trilogy of books. There it is right there. And it's about a 400-page book. And what I'm saying is that we really don't have global warming. This entire hoax is perpetuated. It started out with Malthusians, too many people in the world. This was Harrison Brown at the end of World War II writing books about too many people. And you had Paul Ehrlich coming on saying basically the same thing, population bomb. Well, by the time the neo-Marxists got a hold of this, they were determined to destroy capitalism. If they could say, well, hydrocarbon fuels, burning coal, oil, natural gas, produces carbon dioxide. It emits carbon dioxide. That's a greenhouse gas. It will warm up the earth and we will all die. Now, it's ridiculous because if you look in geological time, we've had ice ages about every 100,000 years. We'll have another one. When the Earth is in a very elliptical orbit, the Earth does not have a constant circular orbit around the sun. It gets elliptical. We get farther out from the sun, we have ice ages. The major impact on temperature on the Earth is the sun. Sun heats Earth. And I also point out in this book that oil, natural gas, coal, they're all abiotic. They're not made from dinosaurs. They're not dinosaur soup. We're not going to run out of them. They're natural. We're in an interglacial warming period right now. We ought to be happy about that. Life thrives. We exhale carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a trace molecule in the atmosphere. But if you'll go to the second story, you begin to see how crazy this really is, because what the second story is showing is that if we go here to electric vehicles, we mandate them basically. You have to have an electric vehicle. What's going to happen is that the number of Americans who can afford these cars is going to decrease. So essentially, what there's another article on Front Page Magazine. It's by Daniel Greenfield. And Daniel's saying basically that 53% of Americans won't even be able to buy a car. If we have these new regulations, 67% of all cars electric, most Americans won't be able to afford them. Even the cheapest electric cars, which are far more expensive than their real counterparts, are just one battery away from being turned into mostly unusable junk. This is what he's writing. And out of the price range of the majority of Americans who need an income of $80,000 to make an electric vehicle loan work. Now, what Daniel Greenfield's pointing out is that's fine in Washington, D.C., where these bureaucrats live, where the median income is $83,567, but 53% of Americans earn less than $75,000. Some of and basically 16% who earn from $50,000 to $75,000 may be able to make an electric vehicle purchase work. They squeeze back on food, clothes for the kids, but the remaining 37% of the market will be locked out. They won't be able to get a loan for an electric vehicle because they won't qualify. Now, I thought the Biden administration was here for redistributing income and for helping the poor, but evidently not when it comes to electric vehicles, because the climate change agenda for the Democrats outweighs everything. And these bureaucrats who are making these rules are not elected. They're nameless. We don't know who's making these regulations, and they are predicated on junk science. That's the problem, is that I pointed this out repeatedly. The climate is not driven by carbon dioxide. We've had far more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when we've had ice ages. And the carbon dioxide does not warm up the Earth during an ice age. Basically, the ice age didn't go away because the cavemen were burning little carbon fires in the caves. It's ridiculous. Carbon dioxide, we exhale, trees inhale. If hydrocarbon fuels emitted carbon monoxide, the global warmers might have an argument because it's poison to human beings, carbon monoxide. But this is carbon dioxide, and it's not poisonous at all. Now, the whole idea of pricing out the majority of Americans from having cars, I think really underscores the underlying agenda of the green movement, which is essentially to reduce capitalism, to reduce our standard of living. Harrison Brown was right. The movement was always Malthusian. Too many people. Without cheap electricity, without cheap fuel, energy, modern industrial societies won't work. We have as many billion people as we have in the world today for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's an interglacial warming period. And number two, we've had abundant, cheap energy in the post-war world, which allows us to have robust industrial activity. In the United States, as the engine of capitalism, we've been able to show the world how to produce wealth. Right now, we're going in the other direction. We're self-destructing. Chris is my producer. Chris, do you have some thoughts on this?
There are quite a few thoughts I have on this, and I want to throw them at you as well. The idea that the government is trying to force an $80,000 average car on people who not only are struggling to make ends meet, but are living in an era where the government's just printing money right and left, that number is going to go up by the time 2030 to 2040 rolls around, when the when everything gets more expensive at the rate inflation is going now, if the same kind of people stay in power. That's another one. Another thing I want to mention is who's making money out of all of this? Are they buddies of the administration? Like, let's say we talked about Stellantis several times in this program when it came to the Obama administration, and you know what happened with them. Or perhaps, now I'm going to say perhaps, I want to play some sound for you, perhaps there are certain foreign interests that are part of this as well. Karine Jean-Pierre was asked a question about this yesterday during the White House briefing, because as you know, President Biden doesn't go out and do these things and doesn't talk to the press. She has to face all these questions, and she's usually a deer in the headlights, like she was this time. Reporter asked why, if they're concerned, if the Biden administration is concerned about China making all sorts of money. So I'm going to play that in just a few seconds here, but think about that. There are a lot of foreign interests that, or foreign countries that control, as you've discussed before, Jerry, the rare earths market. The question is, what kind of companies and who's making money out of all of this?
And by the way, China also has the massive use of coal, the greatest in the world, and does not intend to stop. And coal produces carbon dioxide. China doesn't care. China, of course, says they're going to get to net zero emissions, but they're not doing anything that would make that credible. So let's hear the sound clip.
Yeah, the question is the Biden administration really concerned about China, the CCP, actually, because if it's China-owned companies, basically it's the CCP-owned companies cashing in on the policies.
Some of the companies investing in EV battery plants here in the U.S. are Chinese companies. Is the administration doing anything to stop China from cashing in on green energy goals?
I don't have anything to share on China specifically as it relates to electric vehicles. As you know, the president is committed to this. You see that in his Inflation Reduction Act. You see that in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is very keyed in on making sure that his agenda on dealing with climate crisis is dealt with. So don't have anything on China. You know our where we stand on China. We want competition, not conflict. That's where we have always moved with China. You heard my colleague speak specifically on where that relationship is. Just don't have anything specifically on the electric vehicle.
Chinese companies coming in and building EV plants.
Again, I just don't have anything specific.
Well, that's very good clip. Thank you. I mean, I think one of the agendas here is basically the hard left is essentially attacking vehicles, period, private ownership of cars. I mean, they envision cities where people can't travel very far, don't need to travel very far, are restricted from traveling more than a few miles, and you don't need a vehicle. I mean, this whole private ownership is under attack. And the agenda here is one that's a very dark agenda, I believe, if we really get to the bottom of why the left is so insane on this climate change, which I think even the left knows is junk science. It's more of an ideology. The second book I'm writing on this describes the neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and postmodernism. And it's basically designed to reduce capitalism and to reduce the number of people in the world. Now, if we go to this next article, this article is about the UK and Europe are destroying their economies without reducing carbon dioxide emissions. This comes out off of the climatedepot.com, which Mark Morano produces, has done it for years. Mark has been very strong on this topic. But one of the leaders of a British think tank is Dr. Benny Pizer. He's the director of Net Zero Watch. He's basically showing that the EU countries are essentially going to reduce. In fact, Chris, if you'll click through to the Climate Depot article, which is linked in the article on The Truth Central, you'll see that we have here a agenda where the amount of carbon dioxide has been increasing throughout the world, despite all these climate agreements, the Paris Agreement, all these agreements saying we have to keep down the amount of emissions. Despite that, the emissions have grown in the world tremendously. And so the agreements are not really working. They don't enforce anything. Yet what the point is, and what Pfizer's saying is, that essentially the economies of Europe, which we can see right now in the natural gas crisis, the prices of energy have escalated in the UK and in Europe. The EU is suffering from this. And what we're being warned is that if we continue down this climate change agenda, we're going to be paying 4 or 5 times the price of what we're paying for now for energy. Because the green energy is more expensive. It's not nearly as powerful. It has to be stored. Has a lot of energy limitations. Sun doesn't shine all the time. The wind doesn't blow all the time. You have to have hydrocarbon backups to these systems. They burn out. They have blackouts. It's not a stable. I've always said if you could have one battery the size of a flashlight battery that had solar or wind power stored in it, and it powered a city, you would not have to have legislation like this. All the legislation the Biden administration has passed has really been aimed at enforcing green energy. And that's really where we're headed down this path, which will essentially degrade the economy. And we're going already into a strong recession, I think fairly deep recession. I continue to say that we are just at the beginning of a credit crisis. We saw it with Silicon Valley Bank disintegrating and Republic Bank. That's just the beginnings. Credit Suisse. This is not contained or controlled. And inflation is continuing to mount. Again, the American public are seeing the erosion of the dollar. The dollar is under attack internationally. You've got China making a determined effort to have the yuan, their currency, become the alternative to the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And I think there are actually some solutions in cryptocurrency, XRP, which is not exactly a cryptocurrency, but it is a algorithm that permits international trade to be done in seconds rather than having to have countries hold dollar reserves and all international trade translated into dollars before it goes into a national currency. So a system was created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, which was right towards the end of World War II when the Allies were trying to decide how they were going to put together the economic system after World War II. And that's worked for a long time. But now with the United States off the gold standard, we are finding that the dollar is depreciating in value and countries are moving away from the dollar. Now, I want to cover one more article here in this climate change agenda, which is another, I consider kind of a shocker. This is J.P. Morgan Chase, which is one of the biggest banks in the country and probably one of the survivor banks, what I think is going to become a bank foundation.
He's pointing out the flaw.
Yep, so there we go. Jamie McDiamond is saying, as soon as I clicked to the site, it played a video. I'm sorry about that. So what he is saying is that basically the government and the climate conscious corporations need to be able to seize citizens' private property to enact climate initiatives in order to stave off climate disasters. Now, we're not having climate disasters. It's called weather. We've always had hurricanes. These are natural. This is part of the Earth has weather in order to distribute heat. The nature of our atmosphere is really a remarkable possibility of life, which is very rare. But the atmosphere, the sun hits the Earth at the equator. That's the warmest on the planet. And then what the atmosphere does, what the Earth does, is it tries to distribute that heat to the poles, which don't get as much sun, and to the upper atmosphere, which is cooler because, again, there's less greenhouse gases up there. Greenhouse gases are not noxious. They're important. If we didn't have them, the Earth would, at night, lose all of the irradiance that the Earth has absorbed during the day from the sun. It would be a very cold place in the night, and it wouldn't be inhabitable. So the weather has, yes, dramatic parts to it. We have hurricanes, we have storms, we have floods, but these have been going on for eons. And when you do get dramatic change in the Earth, like 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs disappeared, we had the hitting of a major asteroid that caused tsunamis all the way up to North Dakota. I mean, not that North Dakota was there as North Dakota, but it hit all the way up in the continent in North America. This was a massive impact to the planet. It could happen again. So when Jamie Dimon is suggesting that the U.S. government and these climate conscious corporations, this whole ESG investing, this environment and social governance, basically reduces the yield because you're paying a premium for corporations who enact green policies, which mean they make less money. And so your investment has less return. Now, I think it's going to also become an issue in the next few years because if we do have an economic downturn, I think the stock prices are going to tank. Your 401ks and your IRAs are going to be worth less. And here the government is saying you're going to have an electric car. Maybe you won't be able to own a car. The government can seize your home, put a solar or wind farm in your living room. These ideas are essentially anti-freedom. Essentially, the government is on an agenda which is not proven science. If you'll read the book, study, go to Climate Depot, put some time into understanding the intricacy of how the climate works. And I think we may have some shows on this just to give people some of the mechanics of climate. But the point is, if you understand the climate, it's not fully predictable. It's a nonlinear system. You can't just say because we have X amount of additional carbon dioxide, we're going to get X amount of warming. It doesn't work that way. There are too many variables. If we get more carbon dioxide, the Earth may absorb more carbon dioxide, which it does all the time. It may get marginally warmer, but it won't make a lot of difference. The warming of the planet is productive for life. These governments are trying to essentially destroy life and destroy private initiative and destroy our freedoms. That's my main concern. Now, the last story I want to cover today, and then Chris and I have a little bit of a discussion about it, is this Tennessee House, which is voting. It had unanimous votes in the House and Senate in Tennessee that the state can buy gold to preserve, and the state treasurer can hold the gold in order to preserve the value of the state's money, the state's solvency. State treasurer may purchase and sell gold or precious metal bullion that will be directly owned by the state in the custody of the state treasurer. Now, this is an important story. It's important for a couple of reasons. One is that the states now are beginning to take action when the federal government is disintegrating. Federal government's committing suicide. The states are going to say, we don't necessarily also have to commit suicide. You see that in Florida. You see it in Tennessee. You see it in a number of the states around the country. Secondly, I think a lot of this agenda, this critical theory agenda, which is fundamentally Marxism, people are realizing is a destruction agenda. It does not produce positive results. This next book I'm writing, which is going into print right now, shows that communism around the world, wherever it's been enacted, ends up killing millions of people. It happened in Russia in the 1930s when the collective farms caused massive famine. Stalin actually intentionally starved out and millions of Ukrainians died from famine. Russians basically took their food away from them. And in China, when you had the Great Leap Forward, again, millions died. It was a cultural revolution. And it was insanity in the country with the Red Guard going all around destroying Chinese culture. Because they basically wanted to have a new system of communism. Well, the new system of communism killed millions of people. These negative agendas, I think, we need to take, I'm advising everybody to own some gold and silver. It's why we have Swiss America on the site as a sponsor. And with this Walking Liberty $50 offer, where these coins, which are about 90% real silver, are being offered by Swiss America at basically their value in silver. It's an introductory one-time offer. But if you'll go and talk to the Swiss America counselors, they will advise you. This is consultative selling. I'm not an economic advisor. but I am recommending that you talk to qualified economic advisors, including Swiss America. Just fill out that form. You can qualify for the Walking Liberty $50 offer if you're a first-time buyer with Swiss America, and they will consult with you as to what your needs are, and you'll get real gold and silver, not certificates or stock or shares. You'll get the real gold and silver. And I think it's a good idea for everybody to have some. It's tangible value. The dollar has disintegrated in purchasing power over 90% since 1971. I think it's almost 99% when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And the central banks around the world are buying gold. I think maybe you and I, all of us should too. Now, Chris, I want to pose a question to you, and that is, in these insane kinds of policies, I mean,
insane. That might be a mild word at this point.
Are you ready to go out and get an electric vehicle?
The fact is, I don't want one. I live in a suburban area, a very mountainous or hilly suburban area as well. The Hudson Valley is a lot of mountains, especially if I want to go up north and visit some people or visit some places up in the Catskills around Adirondacks. And there aren't that many charging stations here as well. Yes, I see them every once in a while. They're neat to look at, and you'll see somebody with a Tesla driving around here and there. But the fact is, are they even practical? Are these companies, and is the government really caring about whether these vehicles are practical for anybody outside of an urban or very close suburban area?
If you decide that the climate change agenda, this is why John Holdren, Obama's science czar, his brilliance was to work with Paul Ehrlich. Ehrlich was saying there's too many people, population bomb, we're going to all run out of resources. And Ehrlich said, well, we've got, Paul, that's a good theme and everybody likes it. You were on the Johnny Carson show and all the rest in the 60s. But the problem is you're not scaring enough people. Now, if we could make it such that if we don't stop using hydrocarbon fuels, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. It's got to be existential threat, because you won't get people's attention until you can tell them if you don't stop doing this, you're all going to die. I mean, look at Greta and these others. You've convinced a whole generation of the young that, that this is we're killing them because we are greedy and we're burning hydrocarbon fuels and we're, living too luxuriously. The earth is plentiful. The earth, we can live luxuriously. We can go forward and multiply, as the Bible says. We don't have to deny ourselves everything. There you go. That's a good one. I mean, you get it's the virtue signaling. I bought an electric car.
That's the big one. They either make you feel guilty. They call you. I love the word climate change denier. Anybody who questions the religion of climate change or questions the established agenda when it comes to having to buy an electric vehicle, you are a denier, just like a Holocaust denier. That's the language they're trying to use to demonize you. And then they turn around and you feel so much better and more superior than other people when you pick up your electric vehicle. You're not going to get anywhere in the winter, but
that halo for virtue signaling is the only halo you're going to get under the Biden administration, because they're now investigating Catholics who like the Latin Mass. I mean, now, what happened to the First Amendment and religion, freedom of religion? We've gone to a secular religion, and that's what Marxism is. It's a secular religion. It basically replaces God. That we think God died, as Nietzsche said. We don't, we need to become humans where we can master our own destiny. Well, that's fundamentally the line Satan used in the Garden of Eden. This is the tree of knowledge. God doesn't want you to know what God knows. If you partake of this, you'll be as smart as God, and I will lead you, Satan says, to utopia. Well, Marxist utopia has never come to be. The Marxist ideology, the Hegelian dialectic, is good for destroying things, but it is not good for creating things. It produces totalitarian systems in which dissent is not allowed. What do you think, Chris?
The fact is, on the simplest terms, good creates, evil destroys. That's basically that's what you learn. That's what you learn in the 70s when you play Dungeons and Dragons. I always enjoy that. But the fact is, the evil characters always concentrated on destruction. Okay, and that makes a lot of sense if you look at Marxist philosophy: destroy history, destroy education. Well, we're in an era where where if you question Common Core, you're a racist. If you question the idea that 2 + 2 = 5, or kids aren't allowed to invent their own spelling, or they have to. Or the idea in education today that young people should not learn how to write an essay properly, and colleges should follow suit on that. This is a deliberate dumbing down to achieve the idea of, hey, let's eliminate all knowledge, but make you feel better about it. And if you do what we say, buy your electric vehicle, doesn't matter if you know anything or not, doesn't matter if you have any skills or anything, but you are vastly morally superior to others.
Right. You probably won't be able to get in there and repair it because it'll be too complicated to do any repair work on your own. Again, well, why bother learning anything in school when you can have AI write your papers for you?
Yeah. Have you seen these AI? Have you heard these ads on YouTube or on commercials? These AIs that don't really sound like humans. I don't know who they would convince that they don't realize that AIs, when they do speak for you, when they do these things, they don't have the proper intonations of a real salesperson or a voiceover artist. Then you have AI writing generic copy for you. Heck, we had. I'll tell you a little secret. In the radio industry, we had books. We had copy books of past commercials that had the stock phrases like, "Hey, come on over to this car dealership. You'll be glad you did." The phrases like that constantly were thrown in radio advertising for the 70s and 80s. We have that now. AI does the same thing. It's terrible.
Well, what you're going to find is I think the AI will be the extraterrestrials, and we'll have the AIs being interviewed as personalities, and pretty soon the AIs are going to be represented as if they were an extraterrestrial voice communicating with us that is another force to go into slavery. I mean, this is an agenda that I think has a lot of negatives built into it. I'm still in favor of the fundamental principles of our founding fathers, which was independence, liberty, capitalism works, the idea that we can produce abundance. I'm going to probably take one of these shows and talk about Julian Simon, who's one of my favorite natural resource economists. Julian Simon pointed out that we've never run out of coal. Natural resources are abundant. The earth can support billions of people. These are the positive views which biblically go forth and prosper. God doesn't say go forward and get electric cars and let the state take your home so they can put up a wind farm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, let's wrap it up. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, my producer, Chris. Today is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. And I like to always conclude these shows by saying, in the end, God always wins. God will win here, too. I pointed out the number of conflicts going on, Ukraine, the conflicts going on in Israel with missiles flying, Taiwan, which China continues to threaten. We're living in a very dangerous world, in a world which I think should return to God. And I like to constantly remind people, 2 Chronicles 7:14, God can solve these problems if we ask, and repent for allowing this insanity to have gotten to the point where it's at. So in the end, God always wins. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. We try to produce the truth here, the Truth Central. We'll be back tomorrow.